When the dog bites, when the bees sting, and I'm feeling sad, I just remember my favorite things, and then I don't feel so bad. Hello everyone. So Gree from Gree etc. I hope I've pronounced his name right. I think I have. He's got a really awesome channel. Please check out the channel. I'll leave the link below. He's just done a question on his video. He's always asking questions on his videos. It's awesome. He's just done a question about what makes your favorite book your favorite book. So it's a really interesting video. He often does these videos where he'll muse about something that's playing on his mind while he's walking through a lovely landscape, and it's just a really interesting thing to watch and to comment on and to think about. And for this one, he's thinking about favourite books. What makes our favourite books our favourite books? And he does reference Sean D. Standfast, who did a bunch of fantastic Desert Island Books videos, and I was one of them as well. I was one of the guests, and it was the first time I'd done a live stream as well. Although saying that wasn't live, was it? So the first time I'd done a conversation like that, and then it kind of got scheduled up. But Sean did a fantastic job doing those videos, so I'll check any of them out. They're brilliant. But he asked his guests to bring to the table 10 books that they would take with them on a desert island. And obviously, as Grease says in the video, it doesn't necessarily mean they're your favourites, because it might be just something that you think you can reread forever while you're trapped on this desert island, which is not the same as a favourite book, but it's obviously similar because you're not going to take a book you don't like. So it's kind of similar. But it's an interesting question. What makes our favourite book our favourite book? I think most people who read a lot will probably say it's hard to pick a favourite book, like one book. But we clearly have favourites. And there's clearly lots of go-to books that we might reread, or things that we'd like to have in our collection that we never want to get rid of. And it's actually linked to another set of videos that have been appearing that I know David Wiley has been doing it. I think he started the idea, and I know Michael K. Vaughan and Steve Donoghue have been doing it as well, the idea of essentials in your collection. And that's quite a cool concept. I'm pretty sure Dave thought about this concept before, but I think it's his concept. But anyway, I'll link those videos in the description as well. But that's a really cool idea. And I was wondering myself, what would I pick from an essential part of my collection? And I'd probably pick something that everyone else would be like, why is he picking that? But clearly reading is very subjective. So anyway, the favourite book idea is kind of similar. But I wanted to talk about, well, what does make one of my favourite books a favourite book? And it could be different levels of these things, but I thought I'd mention a few things that I mentioned in the Desert Island Books video, and then I'd also talk about different reasons why something would be a favourite book. So certain kind of boxes that might get ticked, that kind of thing. So I thought, then maybe someone could tell me in the comments whether they agree or whether they look for different things and that kind of thing. So in the video with Sean, I did bring Lord of the Rings. I brought the huge collection of Harlan Ellison stories. It's not just stories, all sorts of things from Harlan Ellison in the Essential Ellison. But again, that was a big collection. I was going to be stuck on a desert island. So I might not necessarily pick that one as a favourite Harlan Ellison collection, but it's a very nice, big, chunky collection that's got everything you'd want really in there. So I know I picked that. I picked Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and I deliberately picked the omnibus with all of them in it, clearly, because I was going to be on a desert island. There was a really awesome book about music that I picked, like about world music. So I picked that. I picked Sheriff of Yornamere, Melker Rubens, which always makes me laugh. And so things like that. Lord of the Rings, I picked Lord of the Rings. I knew I'd be able to reread that to death because it's awesome. And there's lots of different elements to it, different levels to it. So there's that. And Exhalation by Ted Chiang as well. I mentioned that as well. And that's definitely one of my favourite books. So yeah, those are kind of the books I chose for Sean's video. And I had a lovely time. It's fantastic. One of my real treasured memories on BookTube. So shout out to Sean. But to answer Gree's question about what makes a favourite book, I think it's a really interesting question. So I'll go through my list of things that I think I would consider part of the reasons for something being put in my head as a favourite book. And there will be different levels, as I was saying earlier. So some would be more of one thing and more of another thing. But I do think that all of my favourite books, even the non-fiction stuff, I would consider entertaining. So they would have entertained me. So something that I think is very useful as an instructive thing, as a bit of learning that's not entertaining, I wouldn't necessarily call that a favourite bit of educational literature. But you can get lots of non-fiction that's entertaining as well. So I do think that is a consideration. It's not going to be as big a consideration as it would be for fiction, but I do think there has to be a nice tone to the writing and something that pulls you in and keeps you interested. And I think there's an art to doing that in non-fiction. So I think the entertaining thing is part of it. I also think books that have changed your life. So there are loads of books that have definitely affected me in quite a major way. And you could definitely say that some fiction has done that. So I've definitely been affected and influenced by fiction I've read. But obviously there's a very clear link to non-fiction and things that have changed your life, things that have instructed you in different ways or added to your understanding of the world. So that's in effect changed you. So philosophical books, I've read quite a lot of philosophical books, and that's enhanced my attitude to life and my understanding of the way we behave, and it's made me ponder how humans behave. So I do have favourite philosophical books and history books. I do think history is very useful for us to think about, again, in a similar way to philosophy, to think about how we've behaved. And sometimes you can see a thread. So I definitely think there is a thread in history, and I think it's useful to see that. So it's not quite so shocking when something happens, or there's a context to when things do happen, and it's pleasing when something unexpected happens. I think that's true as well for history books. And books that tackle religion. So I've said on the channel before that I am interested in religion, but not from a religious point of view, but from a non-believer point of view. But I am definitely very interested in religion and the way that faith affects the world and affects different people. So that's definitely a big part of that for me. And books that have got some sort of sociological point to what they're doing. So it could be that they're not necessarily history, it could be recent things that they're commenting on, but it could be that they've got an interesting perspective or something to say about something that's happening. So, for example, a book that I'm really keen to get to, it's a book I own called something like The Death of the Truth or something, and it's all about the way that facts and experts are struggling to get through the mire of nonsense that happens now, this sort of postmodern thing where not only do people not believe everything, but they don't believe anything. They only believe the thing that they already thought was the truth in the first place, and that kind of thing. You know, that sort of the truth is definitely quite fluid at the moment, and it's, you know, people aren't even believing science, and you know, it's all very strange. So there's a book about that. So that's an interesting thing as well that can influence your understanding of the world and the way we behave. So that's another box that could get ticked. And another one is what I thought has to be in the mix of all this when we're talking about this is books that have certain personal preferences that are peculiar to me. So there's certain things I really love in my reading, and it's not necessarily true for everybody. So my go-to genre, it's not the only thing I read. As you've seen my channel, there's all sorts of things, but my favorite thing is definitely science fiction. And I feel quite sad when you get some people that have been reading for a long time say that science fiction isn't as good as it was, because there's so much great stuff coming out. And it's just, I kind of feel sad for them that they're not enjoying new science fiction as much, because I haven't really got hold of why they say that. But there's some really cool science fiction coming out now, some really interesting authors, as it has been in the past. And pulpy science fiction seems like that was excused in the past, and now it's like, no, that's nonsense now. It's been done before, shouldn't be done anymore. And it's just a bit weird. So I love science fiction. So that's already going to be getting my interest and making me engaged and smiling and all that sort of stuff just from that point of view, that I'm already through the door, if you like. It doesn't mean I like any science fiction. And sometimes if it's dry and it's just lacking character and stuff like that, then that might put me off a little bit. But I'm definitely through the door. So that's a thing. That's a personal preference. So lots of my favourite fiction books, novels and short stories are science fiction novels and short stories. Humour's a big thing for me. So if the in different levels as well. If it's written with a bit of wit, I love that. If it's crazy, so like silly humour, I'm up for that as well. So different levels of humour, really. But it's very important that there's some kind of wit for me in fiction books. So that's true. That's a personal preference for me. I'm pretty sure most people don't feel like that. I haven't met anybody that has the same love of some kind of humorous aspect to the fiction they read. I've never seen it really talked about on BookTube. So I've heard people talk about favourite humorous books and things like that, but for me, it's even a slight kind of wit or the odd line that's very cleverly put in, or lovely finishes of a chapter, or the last line of a book. If it's got these all little sarcastic things in between characters in dialogue, or some sort of self-aware wry comment, or, those kind of, anything like that. So it's not necessarily silly humour, but that kind of thing is very important to me. So that's another kind of thing that could become a major part of a favourite book. And characterisation is a big thing for me. So in fiction books, as I've said before in a video I did about, it's all about characters. If it's good characters, if they're characters that I can believe in, they don't have to be characters I like, but if they're characters that work and are driving the story and are a big part of the plot, then that's already putting me even further through the door. And the social commentary thing is nice. So if it's a fiction book with a bit of social commentary, that's cool. I always like that as well. And part of the reason why I like science fiction, but actually just the excitement you can get from this, and this sort of energy you can get in a book that's not necessarily science fiction, but has a sense of wonder. So like the characters, and if you like, the narrative voice is excited and amazed by the thing that's happening. And that sort of sparkle in the tone and the rhythm of the page, I think that's a big thing for me as well. So those are some of the things that make a book a favourite book. And as far as what favourite books, what I would choose to be favourite books, so I mentioned some that I mentioned with Sean's video, the Desert Island Books. But I'd also say that when I think about my favourite books, I think about Exhalation by Ted Chiang. I love that book. I think about Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I think about Mind Swap by Robert Sheckley. I love that. It always makes me laugh. I really like it a lot. The Demolished Man by Alfred Bester. Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. Absolutely love that book. It's a very emotional book as well. And I love that. What else would I think? So Richard Matheson's I Am Legend, that's another favourite, because for me, again, the atmosphere, the tone, the isolation, the despair, if you like, about that, I love that. I love 1984 for all the ideas in it, what it says about society, and its commentary on the dangers of a once just ideology, if you like. So those kind of things I find really interesting and fascinating. Blindness by Jose Saramago. A very serious book, quite a dry book in Saramago's writing style, but what he says about human behaviour is incredible, and the way that book develops is amazing. So that's another one. Day of the Triffids, love that book to death, and again, hugely influential on how people wrote kind of post-apocalyptic kind of things, and the way that society breaks down and what humans are like. Love Day of the Triffids for all of that, and I just love the way that John Wyndham writes. So that's another one. Touch by Claire North, that's another favourite of mine. There's so many reasons why I love that book. I love what she does with the way she plays with how this being can travel from person to person through touching them, and the way that they become, they control their life and they can get all their senses and all their memories, and how that works into the plot. It's such a multi-layered book that I'd recommend Touch by Claire North to anybody. It's my favourite book by her, even though everybody talks about Harry August, which is a great book, but there's something very special for me about Touch. I think it's fantastic. But yeah, Touch by Claire North is absolutely amazing. I love that book to death. And then Ursula K. Le Guin, her book, The Dispossessed, another favourite, and I love the fact that it looks at two contrasting political ideologies and how that might work with a science fiction framework, and sort of working around that to make a good point about politics. I think that's awesome. So I love the way Ursula K. Le Guin does that. If you go talk about just tone and setting and characters, Cannery Row by John Steinbeck, absolutely love that book. But again, not particularly funny, although there are moments of humour in it and moments of lightness that make you smile. But in general, it's more about this sort of depiction of this place, Cannery Row, which is so vivid, and I love that. And it pulled me in. I just loved it. So yeah, Cannery Row is awesome because of the writing and the vividness of the words. So there's that as well. And H.G. Wells, Island of Dr. Moreau. So that's my favourite H.G. Wells book, and I think it's because I like the way he writes anyway. So it always sits well with me, just his style of writing. And I think it's just my favourite plot of his books. So I love the concept of a mad scientist that's experimenting with people, doing this, like expanding on this idea of what biology can do. And I love that. And I think it plays well with it, and it's got a really nice plot, and it's got a good finish, and that kind of thing. And actually, I will mention my favourite Stephen King book. So I'll mention the two actually, and talk about why they are my two favourites. So I did a recent thing about my 5 favourites. I'm pretty sure the last two mentioned were Needful Things and 11/22/63. So 11/22/63 is a big book with a big plot, but ultimately it's the characters that win you over, and there is a bit in the middle where it dips a little bit, but I'd say you could take out 100 pages, but it'd still be a big chunky book if you did that. Still be like 700 pages or something if you took out a chunk of it in the middle. But it's got some really good elements to it. It's quite a multi-layered plot, because the initial general kind of blurb, if you like, about going back in time to deal with JFK's assassination, that's where it starts, but it goes off in lots of different directions, and the relationship's really important, and it's got a nice sort of romantic edge to it. So there's all that sort of stuff that makes it compelling and fascinating and brilliant. And Needful Things is a great example of Stephen King literally portraying an entire town, and you really get to know everybody. So when it all kicks off, because everyone's playing against each other and everyone's manipulated, it really works, because you've had lots of interaction and depth of learning about all these different characters, and they mean something. And he's very good at that. And Needful Things is my favourite example of that. And I love the plot. That thing about favourite books having certain personal preferences is very important, because I just love the plot of Needful Things. The idea that some guy opens a shop literally to just cause merry hell in a town by manipulating everybody, I think is awesome. So there's that as well. And I think I'm going to probably leave it there. Have I got any other favourites? I've got loads of other favourites. But yeah, that's really what makes my favourite book. So a really big point as well, because thinking about collections and owning books and buying the books that you love, I do think is an interesting point that I made on a live stream recently, that it actually logically makes more sense to buy books you haven't read than to buy books you have read. Because obviously then you can read them, and if you have read them, what are you doing with them? But in response to that question, I do think it's that one of the aspects of books that you love is it just looking at them, looking at the spine or looking at the book if it's face on, makes you smile. Just, you can get transported into that story straight away by looking at the cover and looking at the spine, and it just sometimes makes your day to just see that, and then it just has that effect. It does the job. So if you're that familiar with the book, it can take you back there, which is quite cool. So yeah, I've got tons of. I could have talked about Fritz Lieber's Sword series. I could have talked about The Kings of the Wild as well, Nicholas Eames. That's a recent favourite. Absolutely love that book. It's just a lot of fun and really entertaining, but again, characters that I liked and wanted to know that they were okay, that kind of thing. But again, going back to that personal preference thing, I like the tone of it and the spirit in it and the energy in it and that kind of thing. So let me know below if any of that made sense. And big shout out to Gree's channel because it's really interesting. So check it out. And big up to favourite books.
Paint me a picture of what it's like to be